Ladies and gentlemen, James Lane here, and I've got to be honest with you. I don't feel good. My throat hurts, my ears ache, my eyes hurt. My eyes hurt, ladies and gentlemen. I can still taste, but I'm dizzy. I feel a little bit hot, and I'm coughing a little bit. I'm taking cough drops. I'm short of breath, ladies and gentlemen. I have all of the telltale signs of the China virus. So, in the spirit of the jackasses that invented this damn thing in a Wuhan laboratory and blamed it on a dumb bat, in the spirit of that, I'm going to detail all of the stuff that's crappy about communist China. And I'm going to do that by going through John Ratcliffe, the director of national intelligence. I'm going to go through his article that came out in the Wall Street Journal just a few days ago. China is national security threat number one. And you know, we're going to make this episode a little easier. I went to the doctor, so we're going to fix this right now. So number one, boom. So now I can breathe for the episode and, got to get the nose drops in. Ladies and gentlemen, how are you doing today? James Lane here, and we're going to get through this article. I know you guys know that I got a cold, but I've come armed today with a jar full of cough drops. A little jar, little container, not a jar. I guess it's like a little whatever. We're not going to make this whole episode about me trying to figure out what type of glassware this is. It's full of the things that are going to make my throat hurt a little less. So we can get through this episode, ladies and gentlemen. China is national security threat number one, and that's something we've known. You notice all of the stuff from Hunter Biden's laptop, it's coming out. It's becoming mainstream, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry, by the way, if my voice sounds a little different. I had the cough drop in. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, I am sick, so you're not seeing me pop cough drops, take cough medicine, do all that stuff, but I am. So you're just going to have to take my word for it. And for those listening, or for those watching, actually, I hope that you appreciate the efforts I'm putting in. A lot of people would just take time off. We are a grassroots movement here at the American Reveille. I work a job. I don't have the luxury of taking time off. My children depend on me. Our children depend on me. Our country depends on us. And for that mission, I take no breaks. I don't care. So I wanted to talk a little bit about China. I wanted to talk about Director of National Intelligence, John Ratcliffe, because he is charged. Remember, we talked about this in the executive order that I went through just the other day here. That's number 13848 that illustrates that he is supposed to put a report together of election fraud within 45 days. So he's got, and that's of the election. So he's got about 5 days left to get that to the president. And then he and a bunch of others are supposed to decide punishments. So if you didn't catch that, watch the video that I put out. I believe it was the video before this one came. I record a couple sometimes at the same time. So it could be one or two behind, three behind, but I'm sure it's probably just the one right behind this. So folks, let's start going through China is a national security threat. Okay, guys, this is very important, folks. As director of national intelligence, I am entrusted with access to more intelligence than any member of the U.S. government other than the president. I oversee the intelligence agencies, and my office produces the president's daily brief detailing the threats facing the country. If I could communicate one thing to the American people from this unique vantage point, it's that the People's Republic of China poses the greatest threat to America today, and the greatest threat to democracy and freedom worldwide since World War II. That's not a statement you should take for granted, ladies and gentlemen. Excuse me. Sorry about that, guys. So, it's very important to understand when the president makes executive orders, makes decisions, he does things from the basis of getting the most intelligence, the most briefings, the most up-to-date information of anybody in this country. Next to this guy right here, Mr. Ratcliffe, he's probably right there, right under the president. President probably knows about aliens. This guy probably doesn't. That's probably the only difference. And you know what? It could be vice versa. Don't quote me on it. Anyway, the intelligence is clear. Beijing intends to dominate the U.S. and the rest of the planet economically, militarily, and technologically. Many of China's major public initiatives and prominent companies offer only a layer of camouflage to the activities of the Chinese Communist Party. Remember, the Democratic Socialists, the AOCs, the Bernie Sanders, they like to say that China's not communist. They're not like the old people. They have an open and free market. And, you know, they did open up their market a bit. They did do things to expand that type of economic growth in their country, but they didn't change their regular government. They're still horrible, you know, human rights violating communists. And they own all of the businesses, all of the companies, and all the markets. So even though there's the illusion of competition internally, there's no internal competition. It's China versus the world, ladies and gentlemen. It's not China helping the world. It's China versus the world. Remember, Trump's plan is to take China out and replace them as the supplier of materials for the world. China doesn't want that. So this is coming back again from the article coming out of Ratcliffe's mouth. I call its approach of economic espionage, quote, rob, replicate, and replace. China robs the U.S. companies of their intellectual properties. They replicate the technology, and then they replace the U.S. firms in the global marketplace. And if you think that just because you have a patent or just because you have a copyright or a trademark, look, I lived in the Philippines for a while, and any Pinoy listening, I'm not comparing you to China. I get it. What I'm saying is I lived in Asia. And when you go to the Philippines or Thailand or and you walk down the street, there's nobody enforcing copyright. You can walk by a sex shop and it's called Fuckbook. I'm sorry to curse, but you know, I walked by a car wash once and it was called it was a car wash. It was called something like Mike's Hand Jobs. The best. It was like, we give the best hand jobs in all of the land. You know, it's just they can use anything. I know that really doesn't have anything to do with it. But what I'm getting at is, you know, they could take Starbucks, right? And they could call it Star Mike's and have the same emblem as Starbucks. Nobody's coming to stop them. All right. They can duplicate whatever they want over there so they can use that as testers. That's what I'm getting at. I'm not saying that that's the end all be all. They don't make much money from that. People do that wherever, all over the world, especially in the third world. What I'm getting at is we don't know what happens in China. We don't know what they do in the process. We don't know what happens in a lot of these third world countries in Asia that China has a huge influence on. They steal our intellectual property and they make these smaller businesses with similar names, similar products, similar things, and they duplicate it. Come on. Think about that for a second. Just let's go to a really basic example, right? We can help you understand this. How many times have you gone on Amazon to get a product because it's much cheaper and it ends up being like a really crappy second-rate version of the product made in China? But it's the same technology. It's just the plastic's crappy, the screws are rusty, the thing doesn't work, and it breaks half the time. And then you have to try to get a refund from Amazon or they don't contact you back. Look, China steals our crap all the time. That's a tiny example of them stealing our crap. From intellectual property to making an Apple Watch called the Schnapple Schnotch for $10 instead of $300. I mean, that's what China does. That's what China does. Take Sinovel or Sinovel or whatever they want to call it. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. It's a company's name. In 2018, a federal jury found the Chinese wind turbine manufacturer guilty of stealing trade secrets from American superconductor. Penalties were imposed, but the damage was done. The theft resulted in the U.S. company losing more than $1 billion in shareholder value and cutting 700 jobs. Today's Sinovel sells wind turbines worldwide as if it had built a legitimate business through ingenuity and hard work rather than theft. Think about that. They stole everything from American Superconductor. And now the world respects them. You guys see how the UN treats China, how the World Health Organization treats China. Everybody is kowtowing and bowing to China as they put a stranglehold on the countries around them. Look what they're doing to Australia. Look what they're doing in the sea next to the Philippines Sea, where they're building artificial bases in the water. They're literally raising islands. They're building artificial islands and building military establishments on them. And then they're calling them sovereign territory and then threatening war to anybody that screws with them. Folks, these aren't good people. Some of the people that are living in the tyranny, they might be good. But the government, that's what happens when you have an oppressive regime who have pushed the policies of the left in this country all the way to the extreme. You get China, ladies and gentlemen. That's what you get. So 700 people lost their jobs, and that company lost $1 billion. And now Sinovel is a respected company, a respected Chinese company, ladies and gentlemen. Wow. The FBI frequently arrests Chinese nationals for stealing research and development secrets, until the head of Harvard's chemistry department was arrested earlier this year. You didn't know about that, did you? China was allegedly paying him $50,000 a month as part of a plan to attract top scientists and reward them for stealing information. Think about that, guys. $50,000 a month. That's a lot of money. Nobody thinks about that. When you think about somebody getting a payoff for stealing secrets, you think of some spy movie, some Mission Impossible stuff, and some Ocean's 11 $10 million payoff. It's not that big. There's a lot of crappy people in this world. I'm sorry to say it, folks. There's a lot of real crappy people, and a tiny price will buy them. $50,000 is life-changing to a family of three with somebody who's working a job. This is a scientist probably making $150,000 a year. We'll throw a little $50K on the top of that to pad my Vegas expenses, you know? Disgusting stuff. No honor, no courage, nothing. The professor has pleaded not guilty to making false statements to U.S. authorities. 3 scientists were ousted in 2019 from MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston over concerns about China's theft of cancer research. The U.S. government estimates that China's intellectual property theft costs America as much as $500 billion a year, or between $4,000 and $6,000 per U.S. household. Could you imagine that? We worry about our deficit all the time, right? You get that $500 billion a year back. A couple years, we pay off our entire deficit, ladies and gentlemen. That's how big that is. China also steals sensitive U.S. defense technology to fuel President Xi Jinping's aggressive plan to make China the world's foremost military power. And remember, I'm not reading this to you out of a tabloid. This is from the Director of National Intelligence. This is from the Wall Street Journal, ladies and gentlemen. U.S. intelligence shows that China, and here's where it's going to get a little Alex Jonesy, U.S. intelligence shows that China has even conducted human testing on members of the People's Liberation Army in hope of developing soldiers with biologically enhanced capabilities. You want orcs? This is how we get orcs. Anyway, there are no ethical boundaries to Beijing's pursuit of power. There aren't. There's been stories of hybrid human-animal chimeras, all kinds of crazy experiments that they've done over there with cloning. Could you imagine the horrible things they're doing over there with the technology they have today? We've already seen what they do to the Uyghurs, guys. China, I'm reading again, is also developing world-class capabilities in emerging technologies. Its intelligence services use their access to tech firms such as Huawei to enable malicious activities, including the introduction of vulnerabilities into software and equipment. Now, remember, I told you I've lived in Asia, and we had Huawei down, I called it Huawei. It's like Stewie from Family Guy. What? Where? Whipped cream? Huawei? Anyway, we used Huawei. And Huawei had this horrible problem. People would get their phones hacked every minute, like all the time. People were breaking into other people's phones in the Philippines when I was there. So I don't trust Huawei just for that. All right. So here, the Director of National Intelligence, which the left and all of the media outlets, the mainstream media fake news, they're telling us, don't listen to the director of national intelligence, the keeper of secrets, the whisperer of secrets, the freaking guy that gets all of the intelligence. Don't listen to him. He doesn't know what he's talking about. They're absolutely out of their damn mind. Absolutely. It's intelligence services, right? Let's read this. Use their access to tech firms, like I said, Huawei, to enable malicious activities. Here we go, including the introduction of vulnerabilities into software and equipment. Huawei and other Chinese firms deny this, but China's efforts to dominate 5G telecommunications will only increase Beijing's opportunity to collect intelligence, disrupt communication, and threaten user privacy worldwide. I have personally told U.S. allies that using such Chinese-owned technology will severely limit America's ability to share vital intelligence with them. I can actually break this down to a really simple thing. It says dominate 5G telecommunications, and if they dominate it, it will only increase Beijing's opportunity to collect intelligence. All right. So 5G is very, very powerful. And what they're talking about, at least in my, professional opinion, what I believe they're talking about is the penetration, the amount that you can actually reach with 5G. 5G is very fast, and it's very, the word I guess I'm looking for is it penetrates. So, for example, if I stand in a freight elevator with this phone, right? This is a 4G iPhone 8 Plus. It has no service. It's dead. Nobody can reach it. I can't reach anybody. If I'm trapped in that elevator, I will starve to death, depending on if the phone works inside. So this is a 5G phone. All right. This phone, I've been in a freight elevator. All right. And this phone gets full bars. Full 4 or 5 bars, whatever it is. I can make a phone call to Alaska on that phone in the basement under the snow. All right. So if you looked at hacking into those phones from across the ocean and you were trying to get into a network, there'd be a lot of people that you wouldn't be able to get into. We can just literally, this isn't the entire thing, but just a small part of it. We can literally say that a portion of people, you won't be able to reach them because their service is going to be crappier. You're not going to be able to penetrate these security systems. The signal's too weak. You can't tap into it. But with such a strong 5G signal, not only could they tap into it, but themselves having the signal, they could reach further with that signal into our networks and our systems. That's the simplest way I can put it. I hope you get it. I hope I said it right. But I have a lot of experience in technology, not just, using technology, but I have experience actually fixing technology and working with technology. Remember, I am an electronics technician. So let's keep going. I've personally told U.S. allies that use Chinese-owned technology that it'll severely limit America's ability to share vital intelligence with them. China already suppresses U.S. web content that threatens the Communist Party's ideological control, and it is developing offensive cyber capabilities against the U.S. homeland. This year, China engaged in a massive influence campaign that included targeting several dozen members of Congress and congressional aides. Consider this scenario. A Chinese-owned manufacturing facility in the United States employs, several thousand Americans. One day, the planet's union leaders, what the heck am I talking about? I just started choking on my own throat for a second because of this freaking sore throat I have, and I lost my place and I thought it said planet. What planet am I on? Let's start this thing over really quick. Consider this scenario. A Chinese-owned manufacturing facility in the U.S. employs several thousand Americans, all right? One day, the plant's union leader is approached by a representative of the Chinese firm. The businessman explains that the local congresswoman is taking a hardline position on legislation that runs counter to Beijing's interests, even though it has nothing to do with the industry the company's involved in, and says the union leader must urge her to shift positions or the plant and all of its jobs will soon be gone. The union leader, could you imagine being in that position, how you would feel? Having to risk everybody's job? The union leader contacts his congresswoman and indicates that his members won't support her re-election without a change in position. He tells himself he's protecting his members, but in that moment, he's doing China's bidding. And the congresswoman is being influenced by China, whether she realizes it or not. Isn't that such a dirty, dastardly trick? It's like third, fourth, fifth hand manipulation. It's like all of the voter fraud that went on. There's an organized reason to why it happened. But a lot of the people involved at the lower levels, they weren't connected to each other. A lot of this was happening sporadically throughout the country. And it was planned in the bigger picture to happen independently, with those parties not really realizing that they were all doing the same thing. So I know a lot of you are thinking that, and I'm confirming it for you, ladies and gentlemen. Our intelligence shows that Beijing regularly directs this type of influence operation in the U.S. I briefed the House and Senate intelligence committees that China is targeting members of Congress with 6 times the frequency of Russia and 12 times the frequency of Iran. That's a big deal because the left always cries Russia while they're in bed with the Chinese. Let's, you can go see my video about Fang Fang Bang Bang for that, ladies and gentlemen. To address these threats, I already talked about that. No, I didn't. To address these threats and more, I've shifted resources inside the $85 billion annual intelligence budget to increase the focus on China. This shift must continue to ensure the U.S. intelligence has the resources it needs to give policymakers unvarnished insights into China's intentions and activities. Within intelligence agencies, a healthy debate and shift in thinking is already underway. For the talented intelligence analysts and operators who came up during the Cold War, the Soviet Union and Russia have always been the focus. For others who rose through the ranks at the turn of the century, counterterrorism has been at the top of mind. But today, we must look with clear eyes at the facts in front of us, which basically make it plain that China should be America's primary national security focus going forward. And that's no joke, ladies and gentlemen. That is the truth. That is the truth. They've already shifted money in that direction. Things are already in place and happening. Other nations must understand this is true for them as well. The world is being presented a choice between 2 wholly incompatible ideologies, just like internally in the U.S. right now. I wonder why. Think about that. Think about where that influence comes from, ladies and gentlemen. Think about that. China's leaders, all right, seek to subordinate the rights of the individual to the will of the Communist Party. They exert government control over companies and subvert the privacy and freedom of their citizens with an authoritarian... excuse me, that's a cough drop. Sorry about that, guys. They exert government control over companies and subvert the privacy and freedom of their citizens with an authoritarian surveillance state. They watch everybody. They control what they do. They control the internet. They control the phones. They control the television. They control everything. Just like our mainstream media is controlling the flow of information to the half of this country that seems to be brainwashed. Listen, this is what the left wants here. Their model is China. Their backers are China. That's their angel investors, ladies and gentlemen. If the left were entrepreneurs, the people funding them are Chinese. We shouldn't assume that Beijing's efforts to drag the world back into the dark will fail just because the forces of good have triumphed before in modern times. These are very smart words from this man. China believes that a global order without it at top is a historic aberration. What they're saying there, when they say China believes that a global order without China at the top is a historical aberration, they're saying that history cannot be that way. China believes that they are chosen, they are ordained, they are given the rights, given the kingdom, handed the keys by God himself to take charge of the New World Order, to bring forth the Great Reset, ladies and gentlemen. It aims to change that and reverse the spread of liberty around the world. Beijing is preparing for an open-ended period of confrontation with the U.S. Washington. What did I write? Oh, there's no comma there. Oh, Wall Street Journal. Wall Street Journal. Really? Of all publications, you're going to forget the comma? You're going to forget the comma. I'm sorry for being a grammar Nazi, ladies and gentlemen. If anybody could ever accuse me of being a Nazi, they'd only just call me a grammar Nazi. And I don't think that is really too bad. Folks, I'm sorry. That threw me off. I just didn't expect an actual typo in the Wall Street Journal from an article that's been up since the 3rd. The way this is supposed to sound, and I'm sorry to complain for a second, please. I'll put some money in the no complaint jar later. Beijing is preparing for an open-ended period of confrontation with the U.S. That's supposed to stop there. Then it's supposed to say Washington should also be prepared. Right? There should be a break there. There we go. Leaders must work across partisan divides to understand the threat, speak about it openly, and take action to address it. This is our once-in-a-generation challenge. Americans have always risen to the moment. From defeating the scourge of fascism, and not that Antifa crap that they're fighting against, because Antifa, you are the scourge of fascism. You and Black Lives Matter are the scourge of fascism. So from defeating the scourge of fascism to bringing down the Iron Curtain, this generation will be judged by its response to China's effort to reshape the world in its own image and replace America as the dominant superpower. That's us. Our generation, ladies and gentlemen, that's our job. That's our task. That's our burden for the sake of this country and for the future of our children and grandchildren, ladies and gentlemen. The intelligence is clear. Our response must be as well. That's Mr. Ratcliffe. He's the U.S. Director of National Intelligence, ladies and gentlemen. That's no joke. That's real. That's a real article that ties right into what we were talking about in the last video that we did about the executive order, which was number 13848, executive order 13848. I feel like I'm sounding like Denzel Washington at the end of Training Day when he's like, come on, Jake, what you gonna do, Jake? Gonna take the cash, Jake. Sorry, guys. I got too many movies floating around in my head. John Ratcliffe, guys. This is a big deal. He's responsible for getting the report that we've been talking about, that special report that can send people literally to Gitmo, most likely. He's responsible for getting that report to the president within the next... Of course. This damn throat. He's responsible for getting it there within the next 5 days, ladies and gentlemen. And I wanted to bring up one more thing before we close this out. We're already running close to the half-hour mark here, and I have a much longer video to be doing later. So I have one more article to go through really quick. We're already near the 30-minute mark here, so I'm not going to be too long. But, you know, I've had a lot of people bring this up, this Johnson versus Eisentrager case. All right, from the 1950s. And they said that that's how we're going to get military action in. And that's how we're going to take out the people assisting the foreign nationals. But I want to go through this real quick. I want to explain to you what it is. And I want to tell you why that's only going to be true in one instance. OK, so let's go through this for 2 seconds. Johnson versus Eisentrager, the U.S. Supreme Court case in which the court ruled in 1950 that non-resident enemy aliens do not have the legal right to petition U.S. courts for writs of habeas corpus. And what that basically is saying is for rights. Like if you're an enemy, if you're not a citizen, why do you have rights in our court, right? A prisoner's petition requesting that the court determine the legality of his or her incarceration. This landmark Supreme Court case was re-examined in 2008 in light of the detention of Al-Qaeda and Taliban terrorists following September 11th. So what people are saying is that because of what this decision was in 1950, that basically said that non-resident enemy aliens don't have this right, They're saying that they can use that to basically lock up Chinese nationals and different people that are involved in this scandal. Now, this gives that authority, the executive order that was done in 2018. And if you want to read that, you can 13848, or you can, like I said, go to the video I did. It's the third time I've plugged it, but you're going to want to see it, folks. That has that provision in there. It gives them the right to actually punish people. But when you go through this and you see the closest decision that was made. I want you to look here at the end. On June 28th, 2004, this is Britannica, folks. The Supreme Court had decided on 2 cases, Russell versus Bush and Hamdi versus Rumsfeld, all right, involving detainees in the war on terrorism. In their decisions, the court reversed the ruling it had made 50 years earlier. This is what everybody's not mentioning. This is what they're missing. And I'm not trying to bring you down, but I'm being honest. This is what everybody's missing. Since they reversed their decision, a 6-3 decision at the Supreme Court, the court held that the U.S. courts may respond to habeas corpus pleas. So that gives enemy aliens and enemy combatants the right to fight in our courts. All right. So that doesn't necessarily work out with what's going on right now because of that decision that just happened that basically overturned the original decision from back in the 1950s, and not just happened, but happened in 2004. But here's the little tricky part that nobody else is picking up on, and I'm going to give this information to you so that you can use it in the new war on terror, the terror of the leftist ideology. You can combat them with the First Amendment and your knowledge. He's talking about China being the national security threat, how they're doing everything to fight us, everything to attack us. If we declared a state of emergency or a new war on terror, or if we were in conflict with China, if we were in an actual cyber war, say they made a new type of war and called it a cyber war, say, who knows? I'm just speculating. Or we just went to war, right? Nobody wants that. And I'm not saying we should do that. But if we went to war with China, then Johnson versus Eisentrager would absolutely stand, because when you go through the whole thing, it completely talks about, look, after Japanese surrender at the end of World War II, the U.S. Army arrested and imprisoned more than 20 members of the German military. They were apprehended in China, and they were charged with gathering and transmitting intelligence about the U.S. military to the Japanese in the months after the German surrender in May 1945. U.S. Army officials transferred the German agents to Landsberg prison in Germany, a prisoner of war camp maintained by the U.S. occupation forces. The German men, they were convicted of violating the terms of the German surrender. I'm sorry, I can't help myself sometimes. Which had ordered that all hostilities towards the Allied forces end. One of those convicted, Lothar Eisentrager, filed a petition for a writ of habeas corpus in a U.S. district court on his own behalf and for that of the 20 of his imprisoned colleagues. All right. That's what this case was. All right. After a series of appeals and court hearings, the case was heard in the Supreme Court. Speaking for the 6-3 majority who ruled against the petitioners, Justice Robert Jackson stated that the German prisoners were not permitted to petition U.S. courts because they were neither U.S. citizens nor situated on U.S. soil when they were arrested. Therefore, they could not receive the protection of due process as set forth in the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. Justice Jackson also added that there had never been a case in any nation in which a writ of habeas corpus was recognized under those circumstances. Then following that, in another opinion, all right, and all this stuff holds in courts today, Justice Hugo Black countered that an enemy alien imprisoned by the U.S. government during peacetime has the right to submit a habeas corpus petition even if he or she is not in U.S. territory and has never been to the United States. He argued that the U.S. jurisdiction included any place where the U.S. government is in command. In this case, U.S.-occupied Germany was indeed under the jurisdiction of the U.S. So they go back and forth, folks. There's two different opinions from the 1950s, and then the big opinion from 2004 said, screw you, they get the right. So the only way I ever see that having any kind of merit or standing to all of those that have brought this up and are pushing this forward like it's an actual thing, Johnson versus Eisentrager will only work if we are at war with China. Done. That's where I stand on that. So, folks, I really hope you got some good value out of this. I'm sorry that it wasn't a really good performance, that I didn't put it forth the best way that I wanted, that I messed some words up. I'm really sick, but I'm going to keep doing these broadcasts while I'm sick. Hopefully it's not COVID. If it's COVID, good, I'll be immune, and then I'll go hang out at the dollar store with no mask on and freak people out. I don't know what to tell you. But, folks, please, if you really love what we do and you enjoyed it, do me a big favor, subscribe, hit the notification bell. If you're watching on Rumble, do the same thing. Please subscribe. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts, 5-star ratings and actual comments in the rating spot, they massage the algorithm. They move us up the rankings and allow more patriots to see us. And YouTube's kind of crappy, but the same thing too. If you leave a comment, that's the big thing. Leave as many comments as you can on YouTube and more people will see what we're doing. That's apparently how the weird, funky algorithm works. Folks, you can reach me directly, James Lane at AmericanReveille.com. You can check out the main hub for all of our stuff, www.AmericanReveille.com. And if you're feeling really generous, you want to help us out, you love what we're doing, you appreciate the research I did, or you just want to see us succeed, every penny that's donated to the American Reveille is reinvested into the American Reveille. It doesn't go in anybody's pocket, not my pocket, nobody. We are veteran owned and operated. Folks, you can give us $1, you can give us $1,000. I'd greatly appreciate it, and it helps us. We are in the need to upgrade our equipment and expand our operation desperately. So that's www.americanreveille.com, and there's a little donate tab right there on the right-hand side. Or if you're going on your cell phone, you just go to americanreveille.com, REVEILLE, and you pull down the little menu, and you'll just see something right there. It says donate, and it's easy to do. We take Bitcoin and we do PayPal. There's a whole thing there, and we greatly appreciate it. I'm transparent. You will receive an email from me, and when it's used, you will receive a receipt from me showing what it was used on. So, folks, thank you so much. I appreciate the support. I'm so proud. I'm so happy, and I'm so excited to just be here with such a great group of patriots watching, and we are charging forward, folks. Don't be down. Don't give in to the leftist propaganda. We are winning. We are together. We are fighting. We will prevail. I'll see you next time, folks. Bye. Ladies and gentlemen, this is President U.S. Grant, Ulysses S. Grant, unconditional surrender grant. And I propose we get rid of the Grammys, we get rid of the Emmys, and we start the Granties. And the Granties would be given to extraordinary Americans who worked their butt off and came from dregs and came from hardship and failed and learned hard lessons and still overcame their utter animalistic humanity and rose to great heights to do great things for this country. But I digress, because I'm not here to talk to you about the Granties. I'm here to talk to you about coming to Parler from whatever social media you're on. And if you're already on Parler and you're seeing this, that's great too. But I want you to go to our Parler page here for the American Reveille. It's at The James Lane. The James Lane, Lane. The American Reveille. I am James Lane. I'm a veteran. I'm the owner and operator of the American Reveille. And all you got to do is come to Parler, sign up, and follow me. You'll see a little follow thing here. Here, look, we can go to Megan Kelly's. You see how it says follow right there? You want to follow me on Parler, if this thing will ever go backwards. There we go. And be one of the 7,500 people that love the American Reveille. We are patriotic. We are in your face. We are here for you, for the right. We the people, for the people. And we are fighting the good fight as digital soldiers against the left. The more people that join our cause, the more we can spread the message and we can beat down this evil leftist ideology. And if you're not watching this on YouTube, you're probably watching this on Rumble. And folks, Rumble is going to take down YouTube. It is the rising platform for uncensored voices, including many of your favorite conservative voices, including me, James Lane, here at the American Reveille. So when you're watching this and you're on Rumble, you're going to see right over here this little subscribe button. I need you to hit that button and subscribe to the American Reveille on Rumble. I need you to share this. I need to get the word out, because we are a community and we are right. We are righteous. We are on the right path to victory. The left does not stand a chance, and we will prevail.